almost all the groups that organize the marches are Hamas affiliated. So that's the sinister groups. The silly ones, the stupid ones, the ones who are just being carried along on what they see as a wave. Anti-Semitism is the dirty little secret of the Muslim community. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. It's at every dinner table. It's always there. I just say this as a warning because it's alarming to me the extent to which you can feel the bubbling of resentment about that.
Douglas Murray is on a mission to shake up the narrative and dismantle every ounce of hypocrisy he finds. In this hard-hitting expose, he blasts through media biases, exposes anti-Semitic double standards, and takes a wrecking ball to the West's silent complicity. From the relentless rocket attacks on Israel to the fervor of extremist zealots, Murray brings the uncomfortable truth to light. Are we truly standing by as Israel faces this firestorm alone?
There's a lot that's more sinister. I would say that the people involved in that sort of thing fall into two groups, the sinister and the stupid. The sinister are the people who, they want Israel to lose, and they want all of Israel's enemies to win. Okay, that's their view. I want Israel to win. And I want Hamas to lose. But if you want Hamas to win, there are people like that, and they're out there, and they're all over the place, and they don't really hide it very much or very well. Most of the organisers of the marches in London are affiliated with Hamas. I mean, it's a fact that very rarely gets out there, but almost all the groups that organize the marches are Hamas affiliated. So that's the sinister groups. The silly ones, the stupid ones, are the ones who are just being carried along on what they see as a wave. They're the same people very often who, just before October the 7th and all this, were, screaming about the climate emergency. These are people who are addicted to a sort of finding meaning in their lives by throwing themselves at big things that are far beyond their comprehension or understanding, which they can do nothing about. But what they do is take out their frustrations with their own lives on other people, on this occasion against Jews. And it's also, by the way, with the campuses and others, what I've often referred to as the disappearance of the adults from the room. My view is that if you run a university or any other such institution, you should say, sorry, this is a place of learning. It's not a place of chanting. It's not a place of beating people down with slogans. This is a place for the dialectic. It's a place for dialogue.
Murray's viewpoint seems deeply rooted in a desire for clear-cut sides, but it overlooks the complexity and nuance inherent in protests and dissent. Labeling those who question mainstream narratives as sinister or misguided not only alienates but also simplifies the broader spectrum of valid concerns people have. Suggesting links between protest organizers and extremist groups feels like a stretch. It's a tactic that risks stifling free expression by painting dissent in a suspicious light. His call for adults in universities to prevent one-sidedness feels ironic when his own stance leans heavily toward a singular view. True open dialogue demands space for differing perspectives, even those Murray may find uncomfortable. Instead of assuming ill intent or naivety, perhaps there's value in recognizing that people can hold genuine concerns without being aligned with extremism. This issue isn't about picking sides. It's about fostering a space where varied perspectives can coexist, something Murray himself seems reluctant to do.
Norman Finkelstein. So he would claim that he's the ultimate advocate of peace, and that's why he's so vehemently anti-Israel. I think Jews have historically always been part of the liberal camp, back before liberalism became a sort of a cult, and probably the most aggressive form of cult today. But I think Jews have historically been liberal simply because that was our way of being allowed to practice our religious beliefs without the consequences of the country we were living in. But now that liberalism has almost gone the other way and become a very aggressive group, how do we sort of toe the line between trying to have freedom of religion, but at the same time trying to distance ourselves from what liberalism has turned into? People like Norman Finkelstein.
Oh, this is very easy. This is very easy, and prominent thinkers have laid this out very clearly. I wish people listened to them. I mean, John Gray, in his work Modus Vivendi, it's a very good essay anyone can read, explains the two types of liberalism. The first one is the one you refer to, which is political liberalism that allows, for instance, for freedom of conscience, freedom of belief, freedom of worship. That's the political liberalism I believe in. But there is a second form of liberalism, which is liberalism as an ever-evolving, ever-campaigning movement. Now, that one is the one that many people are in. I don't agree that Norman Finkelstein is in that movement. I think he's just a sort of psychopath. But I don't say that lightly. I think he's a very disturbed individual. And he's certainly not an advocate for peace. How could he be an advocate for peace when he wrote in praise of the October 7th massacres as they were going on? No. You don't get the right to celebrate massacres and then pretend you're a pacifist. No. And we shouldn't give him that credit. But that second group of liberals, that second form of liberalism, is one that people, in fact, in a way, particularly Jews, I think, need to think about. Because a lot of Jews, particularly in my observation, non-observant, non-believing Jews, what I think of as Palo Alto Judaism, have fallen into this idea that although they don't follow the faith, they don't observe the holidays, or they might observe some of them, they don't really know the prayers, they don't know but they've developed Judaism into this form of campaigning political liberalism. What's the phrase? Olam, Tikkun Olam. This, you hear this everywhere on West Coast America. This. I'm not very observant Jews, but Tikkun Olam is all about that. It's all about that. And these are people who just happily morphed what was their religion into a form of justification for sort of left-wing political activism. There's nothing wrong with left-wing political activism, but it shouldn't take the place of religion. In my view, it's a very, very dangerous thing to put in the place of religion.
By framing dissent as a distortion of Judaism or liberalism, Murray creates an environment where questioning Israel's actions or even empathizing with Palestinian concerns is seen as an ideological betrayal. This viewpoint sidesteps the reality that criticism of any government, including Israel's, can come from a place of genuine concern for justice, not from allegiance to extremist agendas. When Murray labels protesters as misguided or accuses them of aligning with Hamas, he shuts down a necessary conversation about the humanitarian implications of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Instead of grappling with the reasons so many people, including young activists and members of Jewish communities, are protesting, he dismisses them as lost souls. This perspective not only misrepresents their motives, but risks alienating those who want to see a peaceful solution to the conflict, free from sweeping accusations and rigid binaries. It raises the question, if Murray truly supports freedom of belief and debate, why is he so quick to silence those who dare to challenge his views on this issue?
But these people, among other things, there's one other one on that one, which is very important. The only way I see, and I've mentioned this a number of times before, the two places that anti-Semitism in our time comes from most prominently are from the Muslim world, including from Muslim communities in countries like Britain, and it's not me saying that, it's Muslims who also say that. As a close enemy of mine, Mehdi Hassan, said many years ago, the only time I think he's told the truth, he said in a piece, anti-Semitism is the dirty little secret of the Muslim community. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. It's at every dinner table. It's always there. So there are two main drivers of anti-Semitism at the moment in countries like this one. There's the Muslim community, and there is the radical left. However, I add one caveat to that, which is it's always possible, since, as we said, anti-Semitism can come from every direction, not just a lot, but every direction. If there's anything that would cause a resurgence in anti-Semitism on the political right, and I think you see the beginnings of it, it is the perception among a large number of non-Jews, a growing number of non-Jews in the West, that Jews are disproportionately in favor of open borders in every country other than Israel. And this is a very, very dangerous turn, because it actually is true that a disproportionate number of those second-tier liberal Jews the ones who believe in Judaism having actually become a sort of liberal campaign organization, are actually, disproportionately, on the side of everything to do with migration, open borders, etc., etc. You have the great bogeyman in George Soros to sort of represent that movement. I just say this as a warning because it's alarming to me the extent to which you can feel a bubbling of resentment about that. I don't think it's in any way accurate to say that Jews, mass migration in the West is the responsibility in America of Joe Biden, and in Britain of Rishi Sunak now, more different different PM every year, obviously. But I do think this is important, and that perception comes from this campaigning form of liberalism, which a lot of people, Jewish and non-Jewish, are involved in. But it's a great danger, and I try to flag it up where I can.
The framing of anti-Semitism as primarily stemming from specific communities or political leanings introduces a host of issues. First, it risks oversimplifying a complex social phenomenon into a us versus them narrative, which can heighten tensions rather than fostering a unified approach to combating discrimination. Furthermore, this perspective could obscure the diverse experiences within Jewish communities, as not all Jewish individuals share the same political beliefs or attitudes toward migration and borders. Another critical aspect is the implication that anti-Semitism can be fully understood and addressed by focusing on particular demographics. This overlooks structural and historical factors that have contributed to anti-Semitism across various ideologies and societies. By concentrating his argument on certain groups, Murray risks ignoring the role of right-wing nationalism and other sources of prejudice that also fuel anti-Semitic sentiment. His approach genuinely aims to counter anti-Semitism, or whether it might inadvertently fuel division by attributing blame in ways that oversimplify the issue.
Of course, it doesn't need to be left-right. Some Jews have said to me in recent months, you're more conservative than I am, and I'm worried about that because, I agree with you on this or the other. It doesn't matter. It's not a left-right thing. It's perfectly possible to remain, decent on issues like anti-Semitism and be a trade unionist. It's not my particular political direction, but so what? There are certain things you can just agree on. There's basic fundamentals of decency. But the interesting thing, that the challenge that a lot of these people have at the moment, the people who are, as you say, have woken up somewhat after the shock of the 7th, one of the interesting things I do hear is a great woundedness from a certain number of mainly liberal Jews who say to me things like, I was there for BLM. I was there I was speaking to a friend of mine who's Jewish, who came through Israel the other week from America, and he was much involved in the civil rights movement in the 60s, as a lot of American Jews disproportionately were. And he's still like,
why haven't the world paid us back?
Why isn't there any? But we could. The other obvious case is South Africa. South African Jews were disproportionately at the forefront with their black friends and neighbors, and brothers and sisters. They were disproportionately at the front line of fighting apartheid. Where is the reciprocity? That's the thing that I hear from liberal Jews so much. And, I'm very sorry for them, because it's a steep learning curve when you realize that people you have expressed solidarity with will not express solidarity with you in return. And in many cases, people tell me they haven't even got a call from their friends saying, "You're okay, how are you feeling?"
The issue here touches on the complex relationship between Jewish identity, social activism, and political alliances. Many liberal Jews actively support progressive causes, advocating for social justice, inclusivity, and cross-cultural solidarity. However, they occasionally encounter ideological differences within these movements, leading to tensions around topics like Israel, nationalism, and cultural identity. Murray's stance illustrates the broader debate over whether these alliances can always serve Jewish interests, or if, at times, they lead to a sense of estrangement or conflict. In framing the discussion as a lesson learned, Murray critiques what he sees as the inherent risks of supporting certain progressive movements without fully aligning with their core ideals. This perspective raises questions about the nature of allyship in multicultural and politically diverse societies. Can communities engage meaningfully in broader social movements while maintaining their unique cultural and political concerns?
Very much so.
Do you feel threatened at all? Do you almost feel a bit like potentially Salman Rushdie?
No, I never talk about that. I never talk about that. I do what I do.
And you don't feel the need for security?
I never talk about that.
Final question. Mike Freer, he is the local member of parliament in Golders Green, and he has been in the news because he stepped down due to his being so pro-Israel and the threats he got to his life. People like you obviously are brave and courageous, and you, even though we hope that you're representing the silent minority, they are silent. Would you ever consider running for public office? Obviously, this is a question that's been on many people's minds. But
I get asked it in Israel, by the way, so I'm not so stupid as to run in Israeli politics.
You need to be physically fit for that.
Oh yeah, it's a contact sport.
Yeah. But in England, whether it's Parliament, Prime Minister, anything.
The people ask me quite a lot. I've sort of been asked for many years now about that. Look, I just want to be able to say things as I see them, and to try to correct untruths where I see them. As Auden said, all I have is a voice to unpack the folded lie. I have always felt that if I went into politics, whatever party I was in, I would, if I got nominated for a seat and I won the seat, I would lose the whip on day 2. I think that's pretty much a given. I would never want to silence myself. And I think the fastest way, one of the fastest ways, perhaps the only way to silence myself, would be to join a political party that would stop me talking. And I think it would be terrible for me, and some other people would be disappointed as well. If there was ever a way to do it without having to silence myself, then maybe. By the way, I just want to say, if I may, about Mike Freer. I take, and this isn't a criticism of him, I hope it's not taken as such, but I actually am not one of those who take the standard view on him, and indeed on his colleagues. I think that when an MP says, I feel so threatened that I'm going to stand down, that is a moment when the whole state should be behind them. I mean, the infrastructure of the state as well as the country. We had, I wrote a book many years ago on the conflict in Northern Ireland. We had MPs who've been killed before, not just in recent years. David Amess, Joe Cox. We had MPs who were killed in the Northern Ireland conflict, and many politicians whose lives were threatened so badly that, on a daily basis, their cars had to be checked for bombs and so on. And we didn't give in. We didn't give in, and that was just to the IRA. I believe, and since Finchley is the seat in question, I think this comparison needs to be made. What would Margaret Thatcher have done in this situation? And the answer is, we know, because much worse did happen. Margaret Thatcher did not just face some threats, she was almost killed in Brighton. And she lost colleagues and dear friends in the Brighton bomb. And the next day she was out front and she said, we do not give in to the men of violence. The conference will continue. Now that's the Britain I know and love, and I want to see that Britain back.
At the core of this discussion is the challenge of upholding free speech in a complex and polarized world. Murray's approach highlights a valid concern. In an era of increased social and political sensitivity, some public figures may avoid controversial topics to sidestep backlash or reputational risks. However, critics argue that Murray's call for unwavering toughness doesn't fully address the nuanced responsibilities that come with leadership, especially in a landscape where one's words can impact a wide range of audiences and stakeholders. The real-world implications are significant. Politicians and public figures today must navigate an environment where free speech can sometimes collide with other societal concerns, such as public safety, national unity, and respect for diverse viewpoints. For many, balancing these factors means considering the repercussions of their words and actions, a reality Murray's straightforward call for courage may not fully capture.
considering Suella Braverman getting sacked due to saying that the pro-Palestinian protests are too violent for her likings, I don't think it'd last a minute.
Well, I mean, she turns out, Suella Braverman turns out to have been correct too early, it seems, since now Rishi Sunak says that what she said is correct. He said the same thing last week on the steps of Downing Street. So it seems that the former Home Secretary's only crime was being correct but early. I regard being correct and early as being a virtue. I hate it when people are correct too late. It's not much use then.
One of the key concerns is the reduction of complex issues, like activism, protests, and the impact of political correctness, into clear-cut narratives of right versus wrong. This kind of discourse often fails to acknowledge the underlying reasons behind social movements or the nuanced motivations of those involved. For instance, issues like the Israel-Palestine conflict, immigration policies, and civil rights activism are not only contentious, but are deeply intertwined with long-standing political, historical, and cultural factors. When political figures or commentators focus primarily on early predictions or sound bites, the conversation tends to avoid grappling with these complexities, which are crucial for understanding the full scope of the issue. Additionally, this type of discourse can inadvertently shut down opportunities for meaningful engagement. When individuals or groups frame complex topics as matters of clear moral clarity or ideological purity, they may alienate those who do not fully agree with their position. This can lead to division rather than dialogue, making it harder to build consensus or find common ground in addressing societal challenges. The debate boils down to the tension between simplifying complex issues for the sake of ideological clarity and acknowledging the nuanced, multifaceted realities that shape these topics. While Murray's perspective calls for tough stances and decisive action, it risks missing the deeper conversations that need to happen, especially when it comes to issues like activism, identity, and geopolitical conflicts. The real challenge is to foster a space where diverse voices can engage openly without being dismissed or reduced to extreme labels, something that's increasingly difficult in today's polarized world.